Year 112 AD. The outskirts of Rome. A female slave has just been captured after 3 days of running. 3 days where she tasted something she was never supposed to have. Freedom. The guards drag her back through the streets to a small workshop at the edge of the estate. Inside, an imperial official called a stigmata, a professional slave marker, is already heating iron rods in burning coals. Red-hot iron is pressed against her forehead. The sound cuts through the air, metal searing into skin. The smell of burning human flesh fills the room. She screams, but no one stops the procedure. When the iron is finally pulled away, 3 Latin letters remain burned into her flesh. FVG, fugitiva, runaway, a permanent mark visible to everyone for the rest of her life. This was not considered a crime by Roman standards. This was standard legal procedure, a practice so routine that Rome assigned specialized government officials to perform it. Welcome to the punishment system for fugitive female slaves of the Roman Empire. I am Crown and Dagger. This channel exists to show you history without filters. Today you are going to discover what Seneca, Tacitus, and Suetonius actually wrote about what happened to female slaves who tried to escape. Details they documented without censorship. The brutal reality that Gladiator and HBO's Rome carefully edited out 5 punishments, 5 different ways Rome destroyed women who dared to seek freedom. More than 30% of Rome's population were slaves. Millions of men, women, and children. Female slaves were prisoners of war. Daughters born to slave mothers. Women kidnapped by pirates. Under Roman law, they were not considered persons. The legal term was res things. Objects with economic value, but without human rights. A Roman master could do essentially anything to a female slave without legal consequences. There was no trial, no appeal, and no intervention. For an enslaved woman who tried to escape, Roman law gave her owner a full list of official punishments, all recorded with bureaucratic precision. Everyone knows Spartacus, but few know what Rome did to women who attempted the same thing. The reality was far harsher than the stories suggest. The first and most permanent punishment was branding with hot iron. This mark turned her into fugitiva forever. It was not symbolic but intentionally painful, publicly visible, and designed to strip away identity. The branding was burned into the forehead so it could never be hidden, often marked with FVG or a longer inscription. It made her a public warning to every other enslaved person. Branding usually happened in crowded marketplaces, where verbal humiliation and beatings accompanied the burning. The smell of burning skin and hair created a memory other slaves never forgot. Women who tried to hide the mark faced a second, deeper branding on both cheeks, and repeat offenders were branded on their hands. The iron was heated until it glowed white, destroying flesh instantly. The sizzle, smoke, and agony left lasting psychological damage, especially in a society where a woman's appearance held social meaning. The second major punishment was being chained at the household entrance, the most visible point between private home and public street. She became part of the architecture, a living deterrent. Iron shackles fixed her to a wall or column, sometimes forcing her to stand for long periods. Everyone passing by, neighbors, merchants, visitors, saw her. For women, this public exposure carried extra humiliation due to Roman gender norms. Basic necessities were often denied, and ancient accounts describe enslaved people left without food while being mocked. The shackles were intentionally tight, cutting into skin and muscle, leading to infections and sometimes the loss of fingers or toes. Weather offered no relief. In the Mediterranean heat and cold rains, skin blistered, cracked, and froze. Passers-by regularly joined the humiliation by throwing food, spitting, or shouting insults. Other slaves were ordered to participate to prove obedience. This punishment blended into daily Roman life, making her suffering a routine public message. The third and most brutal punishment was forced participation in arena executions under damnatio ad bestias. Escaped women, seen as threats to Roman social order, were sent into the arena not as fighters but as victims. They faced wild animals while unarmed or chained, or were killed in staged mythological reenactments designed purely for spectacle. Arena punishments for escaped enslaved women were designed purely for spectacle and terror. Some were forced to fight each other with minimal weapons, not as trained combatants, but as doomed entertainment. Their deaths were expected. Starved animals were released against them, made aggressive through deliberate deprivation. A hungry bear attacked instantly, and a starving lion tore flesh instead of killing quickly. The purpose was not execution but prolonged public suffering. Women were often sent out exposed before the crowd, combining humiliation with fear. Ancient writers recorded how spectators cheered, jeered, and placed wagers on how long a victim would survive or whether she would scream. Human agony had become a gambling sport. After each execution, arena slaves dragged mutilated bodies with hooks, collecting parts in baskets. The sand turned red, never fully cleaned, building layers of dried and fresh blood. The arena floor itself became a testimony to repeated brutality. Female captives were staged as mythological sacrifices, blurring punishment and theatrical display. For Romans, this was not justice but deterrence through spectacle. The enslaved body belonged entirely to master and state, and rebellion meant the most degrading public death possible. These women were transformed into warnings, silenced under the roar of the crowd. Physical punishment also took the form of systematic whipping. The Roman flogging whip, the flagrum, symbolized total ownership. Escape was a serious offense, and the flagrum, embedded with metal, bone, or glass, was engineered to destroy flesh. Strikes opened deep wounds, stripped muscle, and broke bones. Punishment had no legal limits. A master could order endless lashes. Severe whippings caused spinal damage, paralysis, infections, or slow death from untreated injuries. Afterward, women were forced to work with shredded skin. Treatment was denied intentionally, leaving wounds to rot. Flies infested the injuries, and infections spread. Torn, blood-soaked garments were left visible, making her suffering another public warning. Roman writers mentioned beatings casually, showing how normalized brutality was. Among the most feared penalties was deportation to the mines, damnatio in metallum. For women who attempted escape, this was a slow, lethal sentence. Roman mines in provinces like Noricum and Sardinia were hellish environments: toxic air, choking dust, near-zero ventilation, constant cave-ins, and backbreaking labor in tunnels barely large enough to move. Women faced the same brutal tasks as men, hauling stone, crushing, or while enduring abuse in male-dominated shafts with no oversight or protection. Mercury exposure produced horrifying effects. Teeth fell out, gums decayed, and workers developed tremors that made movement uncontrollable. Still, they were forced to continue. Many suffered hallucinations and madness from poisoning. These broken workers were chained in deeper shafts and abandoned. Tunnel collapses were so frequent that administrators stopped rescue attempts entirely. When a shaft collapsed, the workers trapped inside were simply written off in the ledgers. Their screams could sometimes be heard through the rock for hours or days as they slowly suffocated in the darkness. New slaves would be sent to dig a different tunnel, stepping over the sealed tomb of those who came before. Bodies were not removed from the mines. When a worker died, and they died constantly, their corpse was dragged to a side shaft and left to decompose. The smell in the deeper tunnels was overwhelming. A mix of human waste, rotting flesh, toxic mineral dust, and stagnant water. Some miners went blind from working in absolute darkness. Others developed lung diseases that drowned them slowly in their own fluids while they were still forced to swing picks. The sentence was almost always lifelong. Very few survived long enough for release. Death from exhaustion, starvation, injuries, or disease was common and expected. Unlike visible punishments like branding, deportation to mines was deliberately concealed. It was punishment through erasure. A fugitive woman sent to the mines was not meant to be seen again. Her suffering occurred in complete darkness, but it was no less real, more total, and more hopeless. The mines represented the final stage of Roman control. Once sent there, you ceased to exist in any social sense. You became a number in a production ledger, a unit of labor to be used until complete physical breakdown. So, What did the historians of that era actually think? They documented everything, but their tone reveals acceptance. Suetonius mentioned these punishments in imperial biographies, just details among others. Same tone he used for banquets and campaigns. Tacitus recorded slave punishments in his Annals without moral commentary. Historical facts like tax policy. Seneca came closest to discomfort in his letters. Servus aemonis. They are slaves. No, they are human beings. But even Seneca never called for change. He expressed philosophical discomfort and continued living in a society built on their suffering. None of them demanded these practices stop. They documented, criticized, satirized, but accepted them as unchangeable reality. The lesson is not that Rome was uniquely evil, but Rome was uniquely efficient at institutionalizing it. They built systems around cruelty, infrastructure, documentation, bureaucracy. They made human suffering routine. When clerks processed human suffering like grain shipments, when citizens watched horror without objecting, evil became normal. Everyone had a reason. Everyone had justification. No one felt responsible. When suffering becomes official policy, civilization crosses a line it can never uncross. So that is what Roman historians recorded about women who tried to escape. Not Hollywood's version, but what Seneca, Tacitus, and Suetonius actually wrote. The Colosseum still stands. Tourists take photos. But underneath that sand, history whispers a different truth. Rome conquered the known world. But it never conquered its own darkness. If this disturbed you, hit like. If you want more secrets books hide, subscribe. I am Crown and Dagger.